The Dick Van Dyke Show, 1961 to 1966, brought laughter and joy to millions, thanks to its talented cast and timeless comedy. However, as the years have passed, many of the beloved actors who made the show a classic have sadly left us. In this video, we pay tribute to 39 stars who have tragically passed away, remembering their incredible performances, careers beyond the show, and the lasting impact they had on television. Join us as we honor their legacies and reflect on their unforgettable contributions. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to keep their memory alive. Rose Marie played Sally Rogers in The Dick Van Dyke Show in 1961 at the age of 38, portraying a sharp-witted, confident comedy writer who longed for love but often hid her loneliness behind humor. In real life, Rose Marie's career had begun in childhood as baby Rose Marie, a singing prodigy, but fame at such a young age led to a life of pressure and expectations. Though she found love with musician Bobby Guy, his untimely death in 1964 left her heartbroken, and she never remarried. She threw herself into work, but as Hollywood evolved, roles became scarce, and she was often relegated to nostalgia acts. The loss of her husband and the industry's fading interest in her career left her with a deep sense of loneliness. Despite continuing to work into old age, she spent her final years in declining health, watching many of her peers pass away. She died on December 28, 2017, at the age of 94 from natural causes, her once bright star having long since dimmed. Carl Reiner portrayed Alan Brady in The Dick Van Dyke Show in 1961 at the age of 39, bringing to life the bombastic and egotistical television star who tormented his writers. Alan was narcissistic, demanding, and brilliantly funny, a character that allowed Reiner to showcase his comedic genius. His career soared beyond the show, with the 2,000-year-old man and the jerk cementing his legacy, but behind the scenes, he endured personal loss. His marriage to Estelle Laboste was long-lasting, but the deaths of close friends like Mel Brooks and his own declining health left him isolated in his later years. Though widely respected, he struggled with loneliness after Estelle's passing, spending his final years reminiscing about a bygone era. As time wore on, he became a relic of old Hollywood, watching as the world moved on without him. On June 29, 2020, he died at the age of 98, slipping away quietly in his sleep, his once booming presence now just an echo of television history. Jerry Paris played Jerry Helper in The Dick Van Dyke Show in 1961 at the age of 36, portraying the affable dentist and best friend to Rob Petrie. Jerry was cheerful and witty, often acting as a confidant to Rob while playfully bickering with his wife, Millie. Despite his on-screen charm, Paris's career was a mix of success and frustration. Though he found steady work directing hit sitcoms like Happy Days, he never achieved the stardom he longed for. His personal life was equally turbulent. His marriage to Ruth Benjamin crumbled under the weight of his obsessive work habits and drinking, leaving their 2 children caught in the middle. He suffered from deep insecurities and professional envy, struggling with the realization that he would always be better known as a director rather than a star. In his final years, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor, a cruel twist of fate that left him battling debilitating headaches and memory loss. On March 31, 1986, he passed away at the age of 60. Morey Amsterdam played Buddy Sorrell in The Dick Van Dyke Show in 1961 at 53, embodying the wisecracking comedy writer whose endless one-liners masked a deep-seated fear of irrelevance. A natural performer, Morey built a career in vaudeville, radio, and television, but despite his prolific work, he was often cast in supporting roles rather than leading ones. His first marriage ended in divorce, and though his second marriage to Kay Patrick was more stable, his obsessive dedication to comedy often took precedence over family life. The changing landscape of Hollywood in the 1970s saw fewer opportunities for his brand of humor, and he found himself taking smaller, less significant roles. In his later years, he struggled with the realization that the entertainment world had moved on, leaving him behind. His health deteriorated, and he suffered from heart problems before dying of a heart attack on October 27, 1996, at the age of 87, a once beloved comedian fading into quiet obscurity. And Morgan Guilbert portrayed Millie Helper in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1961 at the age of 33, bringing warmth and comedic charm to the role of Laura's best friend. Millie was perky, caring, and the perfect confidant, always there to lighten the mood. But in real life, Guilbert's world was far darker. Though she found steady work in television, she was never truly appreciated, always the supporting player, never the star. Her marriage to producer George Eckstein ended in divorce, leaving her with 2 daughters to raise alone. She buried herself in work to survive, but financial struggles plagued her, forcing her to take roles far beneath her talent. In her later years, she battled cancer in silence, unwilling to let the world see her suffering. The disease slowly consumed her, robbing her of her energy and voice, the very tools that had defined her career. She passed away on June 14, 2016, at the age of 87. Mary Tyler Moore played Laura Petrie in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1961 at the age of 25, portraying the elegant and devoted wife of Rob Petrie, a role that showcased both her comedic charm and warmth. Off-screen, however, her personal life was marked by heartbreak and tragedy. She endured 3 failed marriages, each one leaving her feeling more isolated, and her relationship with her only son, Richie, was distant. In 1980, the unthinkable happened. Richie accidentally shot himself, a loss that shattered her and deepened her struggles with alcoholism. Though she found immense success in the Mary Tyler Moore Show and other projects, her personal demons, including a lifelong battle with type 1 diabetes, continued to take a toll. In her later years, she faced near-total blindness and mobility issues, spending much of her time away from the public eye. She passed away on January 25, 2017, at the age of 80 due to cardiopulmonary arrest, her once vibrant life overshadowed by sorrow and regret. Richard Deacon played Mel Cooley in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1961 at 39, portraying the pompous, perpetually insulted television producer who was often the butt of Buddy Sorrell's jokes. In real life, Deacon was a reserved man who never married, and although he was widely rumored to be gay, he never publicly acknowledged his sexuality, likely due to the stigma of the era. His career was steady but never reached the heights of leading man status, with Hollywood repeatedly casting him in similar authority figure roles. Despite his professional success, he struggled with loneliness and often found solace in his work rather than in close personal relationships. Health problems plagued him later in life, and he largely withdrew from the entertainment industry as his weight and heart condition worsened. He died on August 8, 1984, at the age of 62 from hypertensive heart disease, a quiet end to a life spent in the shadows of Hollywood. Allan Melvin portrayed Sam Pomerantz in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1961 at the age of 38, bringing warmth and humor to his recurring role. Sam was a likable and steady presence, much like Melvin himself, who found success in sitcoms like All in the Family and The Brady Bunch. However, despite his reliability as a character actor, he was never the leading man, always playing second fiddle to bigger stars. His personal life was relatively stable. He was married to Amalia Melvin for over 50 years, but he harbored frustrations over being typecast, a fate he could never escape. As he aged, his health deteriorated, and cancer ravaged his body, leaving him weak and in constant pain. The industry had long since moved on, and his final years were spent in quiet anonymity. On January 17, 2008, he died at the age of 84, his contributions largely overlooked, his legacy confined to reruns and nostalgic memories. Herbie Faye portrayed Willie in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1963 at the age of 64, adding a light-hearted and jovial presence to the series. Willie was a friendly, unassuming character, often overlooked but contributing warmth to the show's atmosphere. Faye had a long career in vaudeville and television, but he remained stuck in minor comedic roles, never achieving the success he desperately craved. Behind the scenes, his life was far from cheerful. His marriage to Sylvia was turbulent, marred by financial instability and bitter arguments over his inability to provide a stable future. Their only son, David, distanced himself, ashamed of his father's stagnant career. As Faye aged, his health declined, and his vision failed, leaving him nearly blind. With no steady income, he was forced to rely on the kindness of friends, surviving on a modest pension. On June 28, 1980, at the age of 81, he died alone in his small apartment of natural causes. Amzie Strickland played Aunt Mildred in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1961 at the age of 42, portraying a warm and wise maternal figure who provided heartfelt advice. In reality, Strickland was a tireless working actress, appearing in over 100 television shows, but never achieving widespread fame. She was devoted to her craft, yet Hollywood saw her only as a dependable supporting player, never a star. Her marriage to actor Frank Behrens lasted for decades, but the couple never had children, leaving her later years lonely and quiet. In a cruel twist of fate, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, the disease slowly stripping away the memories of a life spent in entertainment. By the end, she no longer recognized the faces of her loved ones, her once sharp mind lost to time. On July 5, 2006, she passed away at the age of 87, her long career fading into obscurity, remembered only by those who still cherished classic television. Jerry Hausner portrayed Charlie in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1962 at the age of 53, bringing energy and humor to the minor role. Though talented, Hausner was forever stuck in bit parts and voice acting, never breaking into stardom despite working in Hollywood for decades. His career struggles weighed heavily on his personal life. His first marriage lasted only a few years before collapsing under financial strain, and his second wife, Evelyn, grew resentful of his inability to achieve success. Their two daughters, Judith and Sandra, were often caught in the middle of household tensions, and both eventually distanced themselves. As work dried up, Hausner turned to alcohol, which only worsened his professional and personal problems. By the time he reached old age, he was financially destitute and suffered from advanced heart disease. On April 1, 1993, at the age of 83, he died from heart failure with no family present. Sandy Kenyon portrayed the allergist in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1963 at the age of 41, bringing a believable professionalism to the minor role. Though he worked steadily in television and film, he never achieved leading man status, a fact that ate away at him as he watched younger actors surpass him. His personal life was equally disappointing. His marriage to Barbara, a former actress, crumbled under the weight of resentment and unfulfilled dreams. Their only daughter, Rebecca, grew up distant from him, barely maintaining contact. As his career declined, Kenyon fell into depression, isolating himself from friends and drinking heavily. He lived his last years in obscurity, suffering from chronic illness and unable to afford proper medical care. On February 20, 2010, at the age of 87, he died from kidney failure in a small hospice, with only his estranged daughter by his side, a quiet and lonely farewell to a life filled with unmet ambitions. Ray Kellogg played the captain in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1964 at the age of 45, portraying a stern and authoritative presence. Though he had a long career in Hollywood as an actor and occasional director, he was never a leading man, and his professional frustrations led to an increasingly bitter personality. His wife, Margaret, endured years of his worsening temper and alcohol abuse before divorcing him, taking their only son, Thomas, with her. Estranged from his family, Kellogg's drinking spiraled out of control, and his erratic behavior on set led to fewer job offers. By the late 1970s, he was blacklisted from major productions, forcing him to take odd jobs outside the industry. He spent his last years alone in a rundown motel, living off Social Security and the kindness of a few remaining friends. On September 26, 1981, at the age of 61, he suffered a fatal heart attack in his room. Bill Idelson played Herman Glimcher in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1963 at the age of 44, embodying a socially awkward yet lovable mama's boy whose nervous energy added comic relief. Despite his talent, Idelson struggled to escape typecasting, finding himself repeatedly relegated to minor, forgettable roles in sitcoms and commercials. His marriage to actress Seema Wilder was outwardly stable but marred by long periods of financial struggle and emotional distance, worsened by his growing frustration with his stagnant career. His two sons, David and Jonathan, resented his absence, later admitting they saw him as more of a struggling artist than a father. Idelson faced mounting despair when a car accident in the late 80s left him with chronic pain, forcing him to rely on prescription painkillers that dulled not only his suffering but his spirit. His final years were spent in near isolation, bitter about Hollywood's neglect. On December 31, 2007, at the age of 88, he died from complications after a fall. Bernard Fox played Mr. Caldwell in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1961 at the age of 34, portraying a refined and knowledgeable figure. Though he later gained recognition in Bewitched and Hogan's Heroes, he found himself typecast, his talents never fully appreciated. His marriage to Jacqueline Holt was marked by unspoken resentment, and the tragic loss of their only son in a car accident drove an irreversible wedge between them. Depressed and withdrawn, he abandoned Hollywood, retreating into a life of isolation. His health began to fail in his later years, and he suffered from worsening heart conditions. He spent his final months in a small apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a career that never fulfilled him, his mind clouded with regret. On December 14, 2016, he died of heart failure at the age of 89, his name barely making the headlines. Jerry Van Dyke portrayed Stacy Petrie in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1962 at the age of 31, playing Rob's well-meaning but bumbling younger brother, whose lack of direction mirrored Van Dyke's own struggles. Living in the shadow of his older brother, Dick, Jerry's career was riddled with disappointments, most notably turning down Gilligan's Island for the infamously disastrous My Mother the Car. His personal life was no less turbulent. His first marriage to Carol ended in heartbreak, leaving him estranged from his children, Jerry Lynn and Kelly Jean. Though he later found love with Shirley and Jones, their life was marred by tragedy when their daughter, Kelly, battled years of substance abuse before dying suddenly in 1991. Racked with guilt, Jerry's health deteriorated, exacerbated by his struggles with diabetes and depression. In his later years, he withdrew from the public eye, spending his final days in failing health on his Arkansas ranch. On January 5, 2018, he succumbed to heart failure at 86. Dabbs Greer played Chaplain Berger in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1961 at the age of 44, portraying a kind-hearted and humorous chaplain who brought warmth to the show. Though a prolific character actor, Greer was never able to break free from supporting roles, watching others rise to fame while he remained in the background. He never married, claiming that his devotion to acting left no time for a family, but in reality, he struggled with deep-seated loneliness. In his later years, his health deteriorated, and he was confined to a nursing home, where he spent his final days in quiet solitude. His eyesight faded, making it impossible to watch the old films that once brought him joy. As visitors grew rare, he became lost in his own memories, longing for the past. On April 28, 2007, he died at the age of 90 due to kidney failure, his passing receiving little attention in an industry that had long moved on. Eleanor Audley played Mrs. Billings in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1965 at the age of 60, her stern, authoritative presence making her a perfect fit for no-nonsense roles. A respected character actress, she was best known as the voice of Disney's most fearsome villains, Lady Tremaine and Maleficent. Yet, despite her success, Audley never married, reportedly fearing emotional attachment after a broken engagement in her youth left her emotionally scarred. She spent most of her life in solitude, throwing herself into work to distract from the loneliness that consumed her. As Hollywood aged her out of roles, she retreated from public life, rarely seen outside her small Los Angeles home. In her final years, respiratory issues plagued her, the once powerful voice that terrified audiences reduced to a frail whisper. She died alone on November 25, 1991, at 86, of respiratory failure, her passing barely noted by an industry she had once served so well. Jane Dulo played Cousin Margaret in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1963 at the age of 46, embodying a warm yet sharp-witted family member whose wisdom brought depth to her brief appearances. While she enjoyed steady work in television, appearing in Get Smart and McHale's Navy, she never found the recognition she craved. Behind the scenes, her life was marked by profound loneliness. Twice divorced and childless, she spent her later years surrounded by pets, the only companions who never abandoned her. As age took its toll, her vision failed, robbing her of the ability to enjoy the one thing that had always brought her solace, reading. She spent her final days in a nursing home, where, despite a lifetime of work, she was just another forgotten patient. On May 22, 1994, at 76, she died of natural causes, her name fading into obscurity like so many others before her. Arthur Batanides portrayed Arnold in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1964 at the age of 41, his knack for comedic timing making his character a memorable, albeit minor, presence. Though he built a solid career in television, appearing in Happy Days and Mission Impossible, true stardom eluded him. His biggest regret was never landing a lead role, a failure he carried heavily. A lifelong bachelor, Batanides had numerous relationships, but none lasted. His inability to commit, coupled with deep-seated insecurities, kept him from building a family. By the late 90s, he was a forgotten name in Hollywood, reduced to attending nostalgia conventions where few recognized him. His health declined rapidly, and after years of battling diabetes and heart disease, he was found lifeless in his modest California apartment on January 10, 2000, at 76, his death only discovered when a neighbor noticed newspapers piling up outside his door. Peter Hobbs played Bill Sampson in the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1961 at the age of 43, portraying a serious and authoritative presence. Though he worked steadily in television, he was forever relegated to minor roles, never achieving the stardom he once aspired to. His marriage to Ruth Cannon Hobbs, though lasting, was one of quiet disappointment, the couple growing emotionally distant over time. His two sons, frustrated by his increasingly bitter outlook, slowly drifted away, leaving him to dwell on missed opportunities. In his later years, dementia crept in, stealing his memories one by one until he barely recognized the life he had lived. He spent his final years in an assisted living facility, often sitting alone, staring at the walls, waiting for visitors who never came. On January 2, 2011, he died of natural causes at the age of 92, his passing barely noted, his name fading into history. Ken Lynch played George Mathias in the Dick Van Dyke Show, appearing on the series in 1961 at the age of 51. His character was a steady, reliable presence, bringing depth to the supporting cast. Lynch spent decades in Hollywood, frequently portraying law enforcement figures in film and television, yet he never escaped the shadow of anonymity. A workhorse in the industry, he was rarely recognized, a reality that chipped away at his self-worth. His personal life was equally bleak. His wife, Marjorie, left him after years of frustration with his inability to express affection. Their only son, Michael, grew up resenting him, their relationship reduced to infrequent, awkward phone calls. As Lynch aged, his health deteriorated, and the loneliness became unbearable. He suffered from severe arthritis, making even simple movements painful. On February 13, 1990, at 79, he suffered a fatal heart attack in his small Los Angeles apartment. Doris Singleton portrayed Doris Darwell in The Dick Van Dyke Show, beginning her time on the series in 1961 at 42. Her character was warm and insightful, often offering wise counsel to others. In real life, Singleton built a steady career in television but never attained true stardom. She had once dreamed of being a leading lady, but Hollywood's ruthless casting decisions kept her typecast in motherly or secondary roles. Despite decades in the industry, she found herself discarded when younger actresses took center stage. Her marriage to writer Charles Isaacs provided some stability, but their relationship grew cold with time, filled with long silences and unspoken regrets. She never had children, a choice she later questioned as she found herself growing old without family to care for her. In her final years, dementia began eroding her memories, leaving her lost in fragments of the past. She died alone in a nursing home on June 26, 2012, at 92. Lennie Weinrib played Danny Brewster in The Dick Van Dyke Show, joining the cast in 1961 at the age of 26. His character was a light-hearted, comedic presence, always quick with a joke or a clever remark. While he found success as a voice actor, particularly in cartoons like H.R. Pufnstuf, his on-screen career never flourished as he had hoped. Hollywood was unkind to character actors, and Weinrib was constantly overlooked for major roles. The disappointment gnawed at him, fueling a sense of unfulfilled potential. His personal life mirrored his struggles. His marriage to Sonia fell apart after years of emotional distance, leaving him estranged from their two daughters, Jessica and Rachel. In his later years, he suffered from declining health, exacerbated by financial instability. A once vibrant performer, he spent his final days isolated, his phone calls to old colleagues often unanswered. On June 28, 2006, at 71, he suffered a stroke and passed away, his death barely making the news. Who's your favorite character in The Dick Van Dyke Show? How do you feel knowing that the actors have passed away? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thank you so much.